full house tonight. How are you all? Good? My name is Lubna Saif Abbas, and this is a little part of my story. I'd like to ask all of you this evening to explore what is the idea of having a successful life. And having a successful life, does it mean that we are doing the things that fulfill us? Or does it mean a little bit more money in the bank account? My argument today is that the concept of a fulfilling and successful life can mean different things for different people. I come from a family of avid storytellers, and storytelling has always been a very, very important narrative in my journey. We as a family would tell stories in cars, going to appointments, and it was a very, very strong and imperative need to go and move forward with the storytelling. And one of the concepts that I have, and I would like to share today, about the idea that it is important for humanity to engage and to embrace and to make and to create daily simple and complex tasks, and that it is very important for humanity to be sustainable. In fact, I believe that working in this fashion is actually key to our survival. And the first time that I experienced this, when I first came back to Kuwait as a young child, was this thing or this concept that I call marking space, or space marking. And basically what happened was, as a young child, I walked into the first courtyard space that I had ever experienced, and this was as a child. And for some strange reason, all I can tell you was that I felt really comfortable moving and engaging in that space. And then, when I came back to Kuwait in the 90s, it was very, very hard for us to find spaces in our urban landscapes that gave us that feeling of enclosure and freedom in a simultaneous manner. And so basically what I wanted to talk about is something that I call authentic space marking. And what basically happened in the 90s is we lost those markings. There was this huge disconnect between where we worked, where we lived, and how we engaged, let's say when we were going to school or whether we were going to different places. There was a very, very important issue that was happening, and that led to this disconnect that we had with how we lived and how we worked and how we played. And so basically what we had happening was one key eradication of public space that I believe has changed the way that we behave from the moment that we walk out of our front doors. And that is sidewalks. There's been a complete eradication of sidewalks. How many of you walk on sidewalks in Kuwait today, the moment we leave our apartment building or a building or our homes? The minute we get into the car, there is that disconnect. This is actually a photograph I took about just 2 weeks ago. Sawabar is one of my favorite places. One of my dreams, and maybe we should talk with the folks at Nuqat, that this will become an artistic and creative industry colony. Sawabar has a lot of history, and it's a vital area. And this is I'm proud to say that this was a photograph that I took. So what I try to do daily, in spite of the heat, is take walks in my neighborhood. This was a neighborhood in Rumaithia, And this was the neighbors of a friend's house, and this was a rooster, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing I had seen in a street, in a suburb in Kuwait. And so basically what had happened is that because of the fact that we don't have sidewalks, well after the advent of oil, we lost the sense of neighborhood. And before you have community, you need to have neighborhoods. So where we are living in today, where we are, is we're actually living in blocks. And those blocks are all disconnected. And as the late Khaldun al-Naqib said in the 70s, that we are slowly moving towards living in a concrete jungle. So basically what happened is, as a result, as an entrepreneur, we had an office in an area where no one could reach and no one was able to park at. And due to the fact that we had been looking for ideal commercial space, ideal place to run workshops and to run our vision for Yadawi, it was extremely cost prohibitive to do so. And what we needed to do was to find something that was welcoming and comforting. And thanks to my late mother, Lady Z, and the rest of my family, it was her idea, and she said, take Yadawi downstairs to the basement. And that's where Yadawi was basically born. And when it started, it was basically me walking out my kitchen on our first floor of our family home after my cup of coffee and my yoga, opening the door, going 13 steps down, and that's where I worked. That was my daily commute, and it changed everything. So basically what happened originally is that was where I started doing my work and my beading. And then what eventually happened is that we were, as Yadawi was starting, we were focusing basically on jewelry making techniques and having people engage in experiencing what it means to use your hands. And if we look at literacy and problem solving today, if you are using your hands in a much more active manner, the outputs and the outcome, and let's say as a designer, you're always sketching, you're always doodling. No matter how much technology we have today, without using your techniques, it doesn't matter how much you're going to be using the digital technology, your mind changes how it actually problem solves and creates solutions with this type of approach. Work that the students did after 4 hours, and this is called an Ndebele technique, which is basically from South Africa. It's called the herringbone weave. And as a result of this, we ended up having the basement became this hub and this center for so many other things. We were basically running close to 400 workshops in the last 12 years that Yadawi home was in that basement in Jabriya. It became home to activists and advocacy groups. It also became home to open houses and other people asking to use the space in a neighborhood, in a quiet street in Jabriya. So it was quite surprising to see what was happening. And the delight that we would have when guests would come and say, where is this place? And they would walk into the side basement, and then they would be welcomed with objects that were handmade, patterns and colors, and a welcoming environment that wasn't judging. It just asked people to come in and experience the space as it was. And what we ended up having is a monthly event that started in 2008, and it's called Meet and Bead. And so every first Friday of the month, people would come. They didn't have to bead. They didn't have to have taken a workshop. But they would come and they would craft, they would sketch, they would journal. They would be able to peruse the library of resources that we had. They were connecting, sharing, showing each other their work, getting support from the people that already knew things, and it was a very inspiring situation that would happen every first Friday. A lot of Fridays, we might have one guest, and another Friday, we'd have 25. It didn't matter if it was one person or if it was 25, because it mattered to them. And that's really what created this synergy and this momentum, because this group of ladies, eventually, 24 meet and beads later, 2 years later, we were floored, because what we ended up seeing is 2 long tables of incredible artistry, creativity, and work on these tables as a result of these 2 years of these meet and beads. And so this group of ladies were saying to me, well, what are we going to do now? What do we do with all of this? And frankly, as designers or jewelry designers or artisans and makers, it is really hard. Market entry was very hard for us to compete with world-class brands or trendy designers with huge advertising and marketing budgets for us, or for me, for example, to showcase my work solo. So what we did is we consolidated our resources and our talents, and that was when Yadawi Collective was born. So we ended up having a pool of artisans who were able to showcase their work. And what basically happened is in the first Yadawi Collective show that we had, one of our artisans, the late Najat Hussain, had this brilliant idea that we would actually set up a beading station and jewelry making stations, so that as people saw the finished pieces, they could actually see the process of what was happening. And they had a better appreciation of what it meant to have something that was handcrafted and designed with love. So then eventually what happened is so many other people would visit our open houses and say that they would want us to have our open houses in their homes. And what was very interesting is when we exhibited in commercial exhibitions, our sales were so weak. The minute we moved our exhibitions into welcoming, authentic abodes, the sales tripled. And so we ended up moving it to Najat Hussain's courtyard home in Bayan for the remaining open houses, and the project began to flourish. And lo and behold, we came full circle, because this was a contemporary courtyard house built in Bayan. And Najat, bless her soul, painted all the walls herself in this courtyard home, and it was the center and the showcase for all of the Yadawi open house and community generated activities. So basically what started happening is we started having our space marks shift to places, but at the end of the day, I would say the one main key theme was authenticity and creativity. And so basically what was happening was a lot of these designers, and they were designers and makers, and I would say they were makers more than they were designers. For example, we had people like Najat, who had a PhD in economics. We had pharmacists, we had surgeons, we had professional homemakers. And along the way, with this sisterhood, we had a few brothers hop on board every now and then. But what also ended up happening is that they started creating their own identities and their own brands. And many of the artisans that started with Yadawi started their own projects and their own businesses and began to do something that was also very interesting, and that was to teach. And it was also surprising, because we started this in 2005, and we started it supplying the market for beads. Now, beads are one of the oldest abstract forms that mankind has created. And it was very interesting because in the beginning, when we said we were going to supply beads to the community, we actually had many naysayers. And they're like, your business is built on supplying beads? Beads? Really? And why are you teaching people all of your knowledge and your secrets? In Arabic, they'd say, ليش ما تخشين مواهبك? Why are you doing this? Keep your secrets to yourself. And I said, well, really, the whole idea of Yadawi is to pass on knowledge and to allow them to innovate and create things that I may not be able to do in my own lifetime. And what's wrong with that? So this is one of the pieces that I have worked on, and it's called Celestial Dance. Okay, where am I? And so another thing happened, which was quite interesting, is a lot of the participants who took workshops had talents. They ended up becoming the educators and the teachers, helping other SMEs and small businesses. So for example, how many of you folks know Solo Tacos? This is not an advertisement. Okay. Claudia Ledesma is a tailor, and her father was a tailor as well. And that's Astrid Hadidi from Soapbox, and they were teaching each other how to, Claudia was assisting Astrid in her product development and packaging. And so we were empowering other SMEs through the Yadawi platform. So when Claudia came to me and said, so as I was saying, so when Claudia said that she wanted to teach sewing, we ended up going and buying 6 sewing machines and setting it up. And in Ramadan, we had a sold-out series of workshops, and ladies came in and they made capsule wardrobes. And then it kept on going. So what was really, really exciting at that point is that we ended up having people coming to us and saying, we want to teach in the Yadawi platform. And that really kept us going. And as well as showcasing the work of many of the artisans in our retail platform, we were also able to showcase other local artists and the kind of creativity that they were working in. And because calligraphy was such a big part of what we were doing, we were able to also do something similar in our retail location. Now, the thing that ended up happening is that we felt at the time that the way people were consuming had changed. The shopping experience of shopping malls and buying things the way that people have been is changing. And we're not saying this randomly. We can see it. We can see that people were searching for authenticity. They were searching for things that had meaning. And they didn't necessarily have to pay an arm and a leg for something that was well made. And so what ended up happening with the space marking is that we ended up building through the processes connections with other movements that were happening. And I give you really good examples. So for example, Shikshuka Market. And then the urban space marking became connected. So when Beit Lothan was under duress, we created a walk and an activity from the Secret Garden to Beit Lothan. And it was those kind of urban connections that we felt were creating a sense of identity and community that transcended economics, nationality, beliefs, and aspirations. It actually united us in ways that created lines that were much more blurry, but that allowed people to express their identity in a way that was not constructed, that was not based on market research, but that was based from the ground up by the people for the people. I'm not a socialist. Okay? community experiences started evolving, and we ended up having this ability to become magnets for different community partners. Many of them are here this evening. And so what ended up happening was we started sharing our knowledge, and we started co-teaching and co-experiencing and consulting and seeking mentoring and support from these other community partners. So for example, Art Studio Kuwait had a monoprinting workshop over the summer. And another thing that was very interesting that we saw happening is that, you know how everybody says, in the summer in Kuwait, no one's in town. Don't plan your events in the summer because no one's here. We are the busiest in the summer. We've been running workshops and activities every summer. This was in the summer season. And a lot more people are staying in Kuwait, and we should be thinking about designing creatively in Kuwait in the summer because you can get a lot done. And this is what's basically been happening. And that's one of the trends that we saw. Another direction that we saw happening is, and this is a global phenomenon, how many of you have stopped using a pen to write? Raise your hand. Yes? Wakim, the bold. Okay, you're brave. So you all use your pen and paper. Let me ask you a second question. Do you think that your handwriting today is as good as it was when you were in grade school? No. Why do you think so? It's getting better. Okay, so all right. You should come teach with us. Yes? We run a series of workshops to improve penmanship in English and in Arabic. But if you look at it, and thanks to social media, we now have this reverence for ink on paper, slowly moving and gliding on the surface, and this kind of reverence for what is happening. And what we saw is that people were gravitating for us. So basically, going back, so we found that calligraphy and penmanship was very important in this journey, and that we have children and adults alike seeking to, if not improve their handwriting, that they would start doodling and journaling and writing their ideas out in ways that they hadn't before. And we actually had a group via the reading room, another one of our community partners, and people actually created their own monogram. Within 4 hours, they were able to create their own monogram, and then we created their own stamps based on what they learned. Also be thinking about repurposing and recycling, and this is also a vital part of the Yadawi program. So all of these items have been recycled and repurposed as well. So moving on, with all of the programs that we had been working, as a little child visiting glass studios in Murano, I became mesmerized with beads and glass. There was just something about it. And it had been a fascination of mine ever since I was a child, and a very, very strong part of my narrative. And so the dream started in 2000. Tried something in 2005, built the first glass studio in a house in 2005, fell on my face a few times, got up, fell on my face a few other times with my team, we got up, and then we had wonderful people all coming together and supporting the first glass-making studio of its kind in the region. And this now is the new home of Yadawi. We got bigger, we had to become more accessible, and that's what we did. And so basically, glassmaking for us became the component that could tie in all of these elements together. So what I'd like to ask of you folks today is, if you want to bake a loaf of bread, saw, nail something down, tear something apart. Go gardening. Allow your hands to touch the moist soil. Go back into the kitchen. Wash some dishes, sweep the floor, bead, write a letter, doodle, scribble. Make a mess, but make your mark, and only yours. I'm Lubna Saif Abbas, and this is my story.